Hi, welcome to the reading for Chapter 1 of The Giver by Lois Lowry. You have received one of the following books from me. Either you have this one, very similar, but it's a yellow title. And believe it or not, there comes a point where the pages differ just a little bit in these. And then, of course, we also have this book. And I ordered replacement books, and I think they're going to be the same as this. Please follow along with whatever book that you have received from me, even though I am going to pull it up on the screen. You can follow along on the screen in case you left your book at school or something like that. And the one that I'll be reading from, I believe, it is this one. So I want to remind you too that you also have your gathering evidence worksheet that looks like this. Keep that handy. Actually, flip over to the back side where you can see the chart. And as we come across some of those questions, answers to the questions, if there's quotes that this supports why. So the first question is, Jonas is so careful in choosing the correct word to describe his feelings. Why was Jonas so careful in his use of language? So we're looking for the evidence that is going to show us why he's careful about his precision of language. And we will need to find two quotes that go along with that. So let me pull up the book so that you can see it if you don't have your book handy. I will note too that often in the beginning, people are a little confused about what's going on. I'm not going to give you the details. Try to figure it out, but we do know that this is a fictional book and a dystopian society. Chapter 1. It was almost December, and Jonas was beginning to be frightened. No, wrong word, Jonas thought. Frightened meant that deep, sickening feeling of something terrible about to happen. Frightened was the way he had felt a year ago when an unidentified aircraft had overflown the community twice. He had seen it both times, squinting toward the sky. He had seen the sleek jet, almost a blur at its high speed, go past. And a second later, he heard the blast of sound that followed. Then one more time, a moment later, from the opposite direction, the same plane. At first, he had only been fascinated. He had never seen an aircraft so close, for it was against the rules for pilots to fly over the community. Occasionally, when supplies were delivered by cargo planes to the landing field across the river, children rode their bicycles to the riverbank and watched. Intrigued, the unloading and then the takeoff directed to the west, always away from the community. But the aircraft a year ago had been different. It was not a squat, fat-bellied cargo plane, but a needle-nosed single-pilot jet. Jonas, looking around anxiously, had seen others, adults as well as children, stop what they were doing and wait confused for an explanation of the frightening event. Then all of the citizens had been ordered to go into the nearest building and stay there. Immediately, the rasping voice through the speakers had said, "Leave your bicycles where they are." Instantly, obediently, Jonas had dropped his bike on its side on the path behind his family's dwelling. He had run indoors and stayed there alone. His parents were both at work, and his little sister Lily was at the child care center where she spent her after-school hours. Looking through the front window, he had seen no people, none of the busy afternoon crew of street cleaners, landscape workers, and food delivery people who usually populated the community at that time of day. He saw only the abandoned bikes here and there on their sides. An upturned wheel on one was still revolving slowly. He had been frightened then. The sense of his own community silent, waiting, had made his stomach churn. He had trembled. Now I'm going to pause for just a second to point out that this is not where the book starts. Quite often when we go back to our chart where we're filling in the exposition of the book and the events or what happens first, this is not the first event of the book. Him choosing the right words is. This event happens to be, well, what is it called when you go back in time before the time of that, what's occurring? It's called, it starts with an F. It's called a flashback. Okay, so we start in the present and he's remembering a time when he was frightened and he flashes back and remembers and retells that particular event. Now we're back to his thinking process. Okay, halfway down. But it had been nothing. Within minutes, the speaker had crackled again and the voice, reassuring now and less urgent, had explained that a pilot in training had misread his navigational instructions and made a wrong turn. Desperately, the pilot had been trying to make his way back before his error was noticed. Needless to say, he will be released, the voice had said, followed by silence. There was an ironic tone to that final message, as if the speaker found it amusing, and Jonas had smiled a little. Though he knew what a grim statement it had been. For a contributing citizen to be released from the community was a final decision, a terrible punishment, an overwhelming statement of failure. Even the children were scolded if they used the term lightly at play, jeering at a teammate who missed a catch or stumbled in a race. Jonas had done it once, had shouted at his best friend, "That's it, Asher, you're released," when Asher's clumsy error had lost a match for his team. He had been taken aside for a brief and serious talk by the coach, had hung his head with guilt and embarrassment, and apologized to Asher after the game. Now, thinking about the feeling of fear he had pedaled home alone or along the river path, he remembered that moment of palpable, stomach-sinking terror when the aircraft had streaked above. It was not what he was feeling now with December approaching. He searched for the right word to describe his own feeling. Jonas was careful about language, not like his friend Asher, who talked too fast and mixed things up, scrambling words and phrases until they were barely recognizable and often very funny. Jonas grinned, remembering the morning that Asher had dashed into the classroom, late as usual, arriving breathlessly in the middle of the chanting of the morning anthem when the class took their seats at the conclusion of the patriotic hymn. Asher remained standing to make his public apology as was required. Wouldn't that be interesting if all of you had to stand and apologize each time you were late to class? I apologize for inconveniencing my learning community. I think we should all try that now. Asher ran through the standard apology phrase rapidly, still catching his breath. The instructor in class waited patiently for his explanation. The students had all been grinning because they had listened to Asher's explanations so many times before. I left home at the correct time, but when I was riding along near the hatchery, the crew was separating some salmon. I guess I got distraught watching them. I apologized to my classmates, Asher concluded. He smoothed his rumpled tunic and sat down. I wonder if you catch what the mistake was. We accept your apology, Asher. The class recited the standard response in unison. Many of the students were biting their lips to keep from laughing. I accept your apology, Asher, the instructor said. He was smiling. And I thank you because once again, you have provided an opportunity for a lesson in language. Distraught is too strong an adjective to describe salmon viewing. He turned and wrote distraught on the instructional board. Beside it, he wrote distracted. Jonas, nearing his home now, smiled at the recollection. Oh, did some of you notice? Could we take a quote and fill it in on our chart? Okay, we're going to come back. I'm going to finish reading. Do you see where there's these 3 stars? I'll finish this point side of the page and then we'll go to our chart. Okay. Jonas, nearing his home now, smiled at the recollection, thinking still as he wheeled his bike into its narrow port beside the door. He realized that frightened was the wrong word to describe his feelings. Now that December was almost here, it was too strong an adjective. He had waited a long time for this special December. Now that it was almost upon him, he wasn't frightened, but he was eager, he decided. He was eager for it to come, and he was excited, certainly. All of the 11s were excited about the event that would be coming so soon. But there was a little shudder of nervousness when he thought about it, about what might happen. Apprehensive, Jonas decided. That's what I am. All right, let's take a look at our worksheet. We need to do a new share, and I don't think I have it yet. So we're just gonna go to, hopefully we can see this here. Chapter 1, here we go. All right, so take a look at your chart. Take a look at the book. And let's peek. Okay. Here we have it. Okay, so we have at the bottom is we're going to do the last one first. We are looking for a quote that demonstrates Asher using imprecise language. Okay, so if we go back to, I'm actually just going to pull my book out and hopefully, so we were on, wasn't the yellow one, doesn't match that. Okay, mine matches the one with the white words, what we were just reading. So that would be page 4. If you have the yellow words, we are on still page 4, because that's where he's giving his apology. If you're looking in this book, we're going to have a different page. Looks like it's 4 on to 5. Okay, so depending on how much you choose to copy. I think I'm going to copy that whole sentence of what he says though. So those of you that are using this book, you are going to, for page number, put 4 into 5. The rest of us are just going to put 4. So 4-5 if you have this book, 4 if you have this book. And remember that our quote goes in the first box, okay? Because it comes directly from the book, we have to put quotation marks around it because it's not our words. Now, sometimes people struggle with this because they think if I'm asking for a quote, I'm looking for dialogue. And in this case, it is dialogue. But, oh, I put it in the wrong spot, didn't I? Oh, that's not what I want to do. We're in the last box. Whoops. Okay, so here's a tricky thing. So it's a quote from the book. It's not my words, so I use the double quotation marks. But it is also a quote that Asher is saying. I am going to use the sentence where he says, I left home at the correct time, but when I was riding along near the hatchery, the crew was separating some salmon. 2 sentences. I guess I just got distraught. So now because it is a quote from someone else, I'm not going to do the double quotations. I'm going to do a single quotation to have it recognize that someone is talking. Okay, so let's take a minute to type that in. I left home at the correct time, but was, when I was riding along near the hatchery. What's a hatchery? It's where they're hatching the fish. The crew was separating some salmon. I guess I just got distraught. Now, I'm not going to put the Asher concluded because we know that this is Asher. In the book, there's a comma because it goes into that. We are going to put a period because it's the end of the thought. I'm going to put the single apostrophe, so I know it's the end of him talking, and a double quotation mark to show that that's the end of the quote from the book. These are the exact words from the book. Now, I'm not going to fill in this box here. You might want to pause the video for you to be able to do it though. So what you need to do is explain how this shows imprecise language. So what does that mean? What is imprecise? It means it's imperfect. Precise means perfect. It's the perfect word to explain that situation. Imprecise would be imperfect. So it's not the right language, just as the instructor had said that this was too strong an adjective. If he was distraught, it would be like he's there going, oh my goodness, they're hatching the salmon. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. That's not what's happening here. Instead, he's just kind of like, hey, check that out. They're hatching the salmon. How does this work? What's happening? Okay, so it's a very different. You explain using your words, at least one sentence in this box. Pause the video and then come back. Okay, so we skipped over the first two. Perhaps you actually had an idea as we were reading. So Jonas is considering a couple different words to express his feelings. As we look back into the book, if you remember, he starts with Jonas was being frightened. No, wrong word, Jonas thought on page 1. Perhaps you want to put that as an example that he's thinking about frightened and goes, oh no, that's not right. Okay, perhaps you want to go further down when so back on page 4, now that it was almost upon him, he wasn't frightened, but he was eager, he decided. He was eager for it to come, and he was excited, certainly. All of the 11s were excited about the event that would be coming soon. That could be another quote, okay? But there was a little shudder of nervousness when he thought about it, about what might happen. That one's not as strong, okay? So I would pick one of those two. Actually, you could use both of them, okay? So as you go back to that chart, and I'm not going to take the time in the video to type them both in. What I want you to do is pause the video. Okay, so I want to remind you that there was one that we found on page 1. And in this book, I believe it's also page 1. Let me just double check. So you have to use your book. This is why I told you to have it handy. Okay, we're going to be doing this a lot, flipping. Oh, that's the introduction. It doesn't say a page number, but if I flip the page, it's page 2. So it is also page 1, right in the beginning where it had said, Jonas was beginning to be frightened. No, wrong word, Jonas thought. And then we have the quote, which shows he's thinking. We have the other one where I said we were on page 4, where he starts to think about using eager or excited. And in this book, I think we're going to be on page 5. Yes, the very last paragraph on page 5 is where we see now that it was almost upon him. He wasn't frightened, but he was ... eager, he decided. Eager for it to come, and he was excited, certainly. All of the 11s were excited about the event that would be coming so soon. Now, after you write those down, but perhaps pause it first, write them down, and then come hear me say this. The third column here says what these ideas show about the precision of language. And if we go back to question 1, it asks us, Why was Jonah so careful in his use of language? So I need you to think about, we have the examples of what words he's thinking of. I don't need you to explain per se why he's thinking those words. We want to think about this precision of language idea and why he is trying to be so precise in his thoughts. Maybe we don't have the answer quite yet. You might, but as we continue reading chapter 1, you might have a better understanding of exactly why he's trying to pick the right word. Now, we did get to him choosing the word apprehensive. We have a definition that you can either get from your vocabulary paper or from the dictionary, because he didn't define it in the book like he did those other words. However, the quote might be right above it. So if I flip back to chapter 4, we had that quote about eager and excited, but we see, but there was a little shudder of nervousness when he thought about it, about what might happen. And if you look to your definition of apprehensive, that might be your best explanation of how he felt there. We don't know yet fully why that's the best word. We need a little bit more information. What I'm going to tell you to do, we're going to end the video here, but finish getting all of your quotes. If you feel like you have a good answer to all of those questions, then explain them in this third column. Complete sentences in these boxes here, please. Make sure that you write them out. Pen, pencil, print, cursive, doesn't matter, whatever you're comfortable with, okay? This is your kind of, like your rough draft, your planning page. I'm going to end the video because we're just over 20 minutes and I hate to have a video much longer than that. I'm going to make another video that finishes reading the chapter. Perhaps I'll explain a little bit more about these, but most likely you're going to need to finish this worksheet on your own. If you have questions, feel free to ask me in person and I will see you for the next video or next class. So I'm going to stop my share. Have a great day.